Welcome back to Economic History 740. This week we discuss innovation and technology. While I continue the format that I've used before, in the sense that I only provide a brief introduction to the topic and then discuss the articles, what I have decided to do this week is to move away from discussing the authors and the journals that the papers are published in. The author details you can easily find on the prescribed articles on the on Canva. And then I've also moved away from the discussion on the journals because most of these journals we have come across before now. So it's really just briefly about what the article's question is and maybe some additional thoughts from my side. So innovation and technology are often related to what's called social savings in economic history. Social savings are when there's a benefit to society from a new technology. For example, if you think about railways in the 19th century, how much easier it made it to get from Cape Town to Kimberley, where most of the resources were needed. It was a cost-saving technology that meant movements and goods could be moved easier, even labor. So this is why we say technology is cost saving, because it often relates to a way to do things in an easier manner that ultimately saves cost. And you can think about your microeconomic theory. If you have lower costs, it means higher production and higher profits to suppliers, and ultimately price benefits to consumers. But we know that innovation is needed for the development of these new technologies. So what we do in this week is to really think about innovation and technology, how this relates to social savings and long-term trends over time that affected this. You will see throughout this session that a lot of the articles are based on or refer back to the Industrial Revolution that we've done before. And that is because the Industrial Revolution was really a structural break in innovation and technology that caused sustained economic growth. So Robert Allen's article is based on the spinning Genie. This was a technology adopted in Britain during the Industrial Revolution that really made it easier to wind cotton and wool into usable materials. It was a low-cost technology that could be easily adaptable, and he compares it to other parts in the world like France and India as well. Why was this technology specifically in Britain and not in other parts of the world? As I've mentioned, it's the Economic History Review article, and we have read some of Allen's other work on wages as well in the Industrial Revolution session. So Joe Moser, 2018 Explorations in Economic History Journal article. So he thinks about it from a more macro perspective, where Allen has a micro perspective where he specifically focuses on the spinning jenny, the yarn industry, the wool industry, the cotton industry. It's a very small, specific study. Moser takes a bigger picture or macro view where he links technology and technological progress to economic growth. So you will know from macroeconomics about steady state economics or steady state conditions, and you'll see Moser uses those conditions in this paper as well. You will see he asks the question about sustained economic growth because, as I mentioned in the introduction, the Industrial Revolution was really this period that heralded sustained economic growth into world history. And then what the question is, what happens going forward? So Philip Hoffman's paper asks a relatively simple question. Why did Europe conquer the world? And the answer that he provides, or the how he gets to his answer, is he uses gunpowder and game theory to explain this. Gunpowder originated in China, but in China it was used for fireworks rather than guns and ammunition. And he makes the argument that technology in itself is not enough to generate economic growth, but that you need competition between producers as well. Moser, in her 2016 article, really looks at patents and if they are required to protect intellectual property. So you can think about the property rights session that we have done already as well when you're reading this article. And she asks the questions, how did or if patents spurred or hindered the development of technology? In most cases, people take the view that patents save intellectual property rights and therefore fosters innovation. She provides what is called a more nuanced view that this might also hinder intellectual property rights, and patents might also hinder innovation. If you think about if something is protected by intellectual property rights, but there is something that you can change to make it better, that might not then be improved because of the intellectual property rights and patents that's on that technology. McLeod, 1986. So again, this is actually an article that you should read before you read Moser because the two are closely related. So where Moser asks innovation, patents, and intellectual property rights, McLeod really focuses on if patents help innovation or if it's just a mechanism for stocks. So does patents help stock creation as well? What I wanted you to also note with these two articles and with the McLeod article, and I haven't mentioned this before, but if you read all the articles, notice the difference in how they were written in the 1980s, for example, and now. Now there's a bigger focus on data, models, methods, whereas in the 1980s, the articles are often just focused on describing the situation. There's no data or very little data that can be focused on in a few short paragraphs or tables. So really note and think about what caused those changes as well. So Bokod et al. Is a very recent paper on how shipping times changed in the 19th century. Dan Bokod is one of the experts on social savings. You can read his other papers as well on how technology ultimately leads to social savings and how this relates to technology changes. So in this paper, I wanted to focus more on the social savings side because it's not really a technology, but it was just innovation. It was a way of running ships that made a massive change to shipping times. If you read this article, you can, for example, think of postal services as well. How did that change over time? Think about Donald Trump during the 2020 election and how it slowed down postal services in the US. So that can introduce costs into society rather than taking the costs away and minimizing costs. Then finally, Hanlon in a 2015 paper. Again, this is in Econometrica. We've seen this before with Melissa Dell, for example, where it's a more technical paper and it's more technical than other economic history journals or papers that you will read in this course. So he really tries to identify the causal link between inputs, technology development, and price changes. So obviously price changes affect consumers as well as producers. And then he uses the Civil War as an external, the United States Civil War, I should say, as an external shock to the British cotton industry. And he shows how that changed the behaviors of British cotton producers. So I hope you enjoy this and that you do learn something in this week.